The strongest demons, Gargas and Balak, fought endlessly in hell, each claiming to be the baddest of them all. Until someone unexpected showed up at the Demon King's palace. Balak asks why the king wants to go back to Earth when he already has everything. To everyone's shock, it was actually a human named Kambo. Kambo reveals he's been stuck in hell for 10,000 years and is totally over fighting. He says he's sick of hell's food and is craving kimchi and comic stuff the demons just don't get. He also admits he wants someone to love. Just then, the succubus queen shows up. Lilith asks if her beauty isn't enough for him. Kambo fires back that he's not a fan of all the extra eyes and tentacles. But hey, if there's a hole, there's a goal. Dead set Kambo orders Balak to prep the ritual. The statues start to glow as Kambo steps into the portal back to Earth. He quickly jumps to stop Lilith from following him and wakes up in a forest. Hearing a girl scream, he bolts to help her, hoping she's human. After saving her, she thanks him, but Kambo immediately hits her with a marriage proposal. He apologizes later though. And together they jump into a portal that zaps them to Earth on Recap Manhwa. Siola invites him over to her place to repay the favor, and he's down. There he meets her mom and finds out that portals started popping up right after he got sent to hell. Finally, they serve him the kimchi stew he'd been dying for, but the chill. Dinner gets interrupted when Siola's brother barges in screaming about her going into the gate alone. He insists on dragging her with him. Seeing Kambo, he spills his soup. Pissed, Kambo decks him, warning him to never disrespect kimchi stew. Welcome to the 9 Hells, the darkest depths of the underworld, a treacherous place where only the strongest demons gathered. The whole place was incredibly hostile, with a burning path of eternal fire and rivers of lava that could incinerate everything, a twisted, unpredictable landscape under a blood-red sky. There, the most powerful demons would throw down in endless battles. Definitely not a vacation spot. In the middle of this chaotic world, a massive jacked demon with a terrifying look emerged, chasing a red lion-shaped demon that was soaring through the crimson skies. The giant demon slammed the ground, shattering it to pieces, but the red lion gracefully dodged the attack. In response, the red lion launched a devastating counterattack right to the giant's face, sending him flying through the debris and lava. Despite the savage hit, the giant demon known as the Great Demon Gargas was still on his feet, though visibly pissed off and furious at the red lion, who turned out to be the renowned Great Demon Balak of the 9th Hell. The stage was set for a one-on-one showdown between the two great demons, Gargas and Balak, as they wrecked the landscape with their fierce attacks. Balak, with a sick aerial maneuver, dive-bombed and finished with a powerful blow that sent Gargas crashing to the ground again. The fight was heating up and the end seemed near. In the middle of the crater of destruction, Balak was caught off guard when he noticed how small, one-eyed demons, clones of Gargas, popped up out of nowhere to hold him down. Gargas then launched his most fearsome attack, but it missed. It was obvious Balak couldn't be stopped by such cheap tricks. With his fists engulfed in the very flames of hell and fueled by pure hatred and rage, Balak punched straight through Gargas's chest, ending the life of one of the great demons of the 9th Circle. In that endless fight for the title of the strongest, it was believed there would never be a true winner, until someone else appeared. Someone even more powerful. In a dark and sinister castle, thousands of grotesque and terrifying demons gathered. Shaking with fear, they knelt in silence, staring straight ahead. Among them was a familiar face. A demon over 16 feet tall, covered in red fur, with a muscular body as tough as rock. He had goat-like horns on his forehead, massive fangs, and huge bat wings on his back. Despite his terrifying look, he was kneeling in fear before someone superior. It was Balak. In the center of the castle stood the throne of the supreme ruler under the skull of some indescribable creature. There sat the Demon King, lord of all demons, who had unified the 7 factions that once divided hell. The king sat on a throne made from the bones of the most powerful demons he had ever defeated. His presence was insane, with a terrifying helmet covered in a purple flame and decked out in dark armor. With dragon heads sticking out of his shoulders, his demonic energy was so overwhelming it left Balak breathless. Balak, who was considered unbeatable by all but a few, trembled as he approached the Demon King. The monarch's silence filled everyone with unease and terror. The demonic energy surrounding him grew even more intense as he unleashed his *** authority of predation ***, a power that could absorb the bodies and skills of any demon he touched. The king had devoured every single demon in the 9 Hells, becoming the absolute pinnacle of evil. The thousands of lesser demons trembled in fear, convinced they were about to be devoured. The king, not happy with his situation, began to speak. He had everything you could imagine in the depths of hell, but he had wasted 10,000 years trapped in a world that never changed, living in an endless cycle of slaughter. He slowly took off his helmet, revealing the face of a young man with dark hair and red eyes. And that's how the real protagonist introduced himself, Okambo, the Demon King, the peak of all evil. His loyal subordinate Balak totally misunderstood his lord's dissatisfaction for hunger and quickly ordered the demons to whip up some food. They brought a huge covered platter. To show it off, Balak lifted the lid, revealing the head of Lord Focalor, who led the largest remaining army of the dukes. It was a grotesque octopus-like head, with tentacles and blue slime dripping from it. Disgusted, Kambo chucked the head back full of rage. His demonic energy exploded as he declared that what he wanted wasn't that asterisk, but kimchi stew. The demons were just confused. They had never understood the concept of food. For them, eating was just consuming whoever you beat in a fight. Still, they started to murmur and cheer at their king's words, even if they had no clue what he meant. Balak suggested his lord was bored because there was no entertainment left since he'd already destroyed the 7 archdukes and found no joy in slaughter anymore. The demons, however, kept cheering for their bloodthirsty monarch, which only made Kambo more frustrated since the only distraction he wanted was to read novels and manga. Balak and the horde of demons knelt solemnly since not even with all their insane powers could they satisfy the king. Balak even went so far as to offer his own life, looking desperate for not being good enough for his lord. Kambo muttered that if he at least had someone to love in this dump it wouldn't be so bad. Just then, a sensual voice rose from the demon crowd. It was Lilith, the succubus queen, considered the biggest hottie in hell. Her presence alone captivated everyone in the castle. She acted all hurt that the king wasn't satisfied with having her heart. Tears streamed from every one of her 10 eyes as the tentacles that made up her hair writhed all over the place. At that moment, Kambo finally snapped. Lilith insisted on giving herself to him that very night. But the king with full authority told her to back off. She, however, took it as him being shy and reached out her slimy tentacles to grab his arm. Kambo's face showed pure disgust, though the horde of demons reacted with blushes and jealousy seeing Lilith so close to their monarch. The king's disappointment was a big oof. The succubi, who were supposed to be beautiful women according to the stories, were a far cry from that. To him, Lilith was even more grotesque than Balak, even though he figured looks shouldn't matter in love. This whole situation was just too much. It wasn't about her being pretty or ugly, it was just that Lilith's appearance did not fit human standards at all. In desperation, Kambo clenched his fist and firmly thought one single word: Earth. He had to get back to Earth. This decision shocked both Balak and Lilith. Even though his subordinates had tried for 10,000 years to convince him to stay in hell, all that pressure only made him more determined. After consuming the last of the archdukes, Kambo gripped the throne resolved. The time had come. The demon king stood up and walked through his castle hall, ready to claim the reward for his struggle. The Endless One ordered Balak to make the preparations. Balak hesitated, looking for confirmation, but the king simply unleashed an immense demonic energy, glaring at him with contempt, not even bothering to repeat himself. Balak dropped to his knees instantly, apologized, and rushed the horde to get everything organized. In no time, thousands of demons started prepping the gear of the 7 princes of hell and summoning someone named Ammon in a dark, sinister cavern. A shaman-like sorcerer clutched a death-charged staff surrounded by horned stone statues. Each statue held an artifact in its hands. This was the gear of the 7 princes of hell. Kambo, Balak, and Lilith stopped at the foot of the stairs leading to a shadowy altar set between the statues. Balak informed the king that everything was ready. As Kambo began his slow ascent, Lilith couldn't stop the tears from falling. Knowing what her king was about to do, even Balak got choked up watching him walk forward with such resolve. Kambo let his imposing armor fall, revealing a body forged by millennia of battle and conquest. 10,000 years of hellish training had built that physique. The sorcerer greeted the king and instructed him to focus a massive amount of demonic energy into the gear of the 7 princes of hell to warp space and time, and force open a dimensional rift. This sorcerer was revealed to be the dark mage Ammon. Kambo immediately followed his instructions, since the only thing on his mind was getting back home. Before the altar, his demonic energy overflowed like a purple smoke that filled the entire chamber. Space itself began to react as his energy condensed into a vast, purple ocean that then formed into an extremely pure sphere, Kambo's 1,000-year-old demonic core. After an eternal silence, a single drop broke the stillness. The core exploded and a blast of energy ripped through everything. Ammon, ecstatic, was completely overwhelmed by the glory of its creation. The eyes of the stone statues began to glow with the same purple hue, and Ammon confirmed that the gear of the 7 princes of hell was reacting to the king's power, and that the gate would soon open. As he warped the very fabric of space and time, Kambo thought that even if he got back to Earth, his family, friends, and the woman he loved would be long gone. But still, anything was better than being stuck in the depths of hell. The gate started to open, and Kambo stepped toward his new destiny. Lilith and Balak called out, begging him not to leave them, but he just answered coldly, "Don't cry." Lilith, getting her hopes up, took his words as an attempt to comfort her, and thrilled started leaking fluids from her tentacles, screaming that she wanted to follow him. Without a second thought, Kambo leaped through the gate. Lilith vowed she would follow him, no matter what. But the king turned mid-fall and with a mocking grin dissed her Balak and hell itself. He never wanted to see them or that place ever again. As he shot through the rift in time and space, he thought back on his 10,000 years in hell. There was no past he wanted to change and no future he was aiming for. He just wanted something that felt like the Earth he remembered. He finally landed next to a glowing blue orb in a futuristic-looking room. A wave of relief washed over him and he smiled at the thought of finally being home. However, his joy didn't last long. The orb switched from blue to red, zapping out electric currents. A notification popped up stating that the Gaia system was detecting the core. Red laser lines shot up around Kambo, trapping him in the room. He was completely confused by what was happening. Soon, more warnings started flashing, indicating that the core's power was off the charts, exceeding the system's limit and triggering defense mechanisms across all dimensions. Kambo's very existence had overloaded the Gaia system, causing a red beam to fire right at him. Still, the system couldn't eliminate the core, and a message popped up declaring the task impossible. The core was just too tough, During the elimination attempt, Kanbo gritted his teeth and endured the pressure, until finally the system initiated a restricted seal. Since it couldn't exterminate the Demon King, it moved to lock him up instead. Kanbo roared in fury as he was sealed away, but he eventually blacked out. The trip back to Earth was pretty rough. When Kanbo came to, he found himself lying in a grassy field. He opened his crimson eyes and saw a dense forest past the bushes, feeling a rush of relief, thinking he was finally home. His body ached like hell, but to get a handle on the situation, he checked his status. A confusing window popped up. It showed his name Kanbo and stated he was level 1 in the first stage of awakening. It also revealed that his initial attribute was the authority of predation, though its rank was unknown. His second attribute would only unlock at level 10. He had an unknown innate class, and his innate stat was demonic energy. As he was thinking about how weird all this was, a nasty sound like metal scraping caught his attention. Turning toward the noise, he was shocked to see a pack of armed goblins charging at him like he was prey. Kanbo was confused. The Earth he knew didn't have creatures like this. He wondered where the hell he'd ended up. The disgusting goblins swarmed him, swinging all kinds of weapons. Instantly, Kanbo tried to use his demonic energy, focusing all his power into his right hand. To his shock, the energy he tried to summon wouldn't appear. The core of 10,000 demons was alarmingly weak. Before he could even figure out how his powers had been sealed, the goblins were already on top of him. He didn't want to rely on skills he would have looked down on before, but he had no other choice. In a flash, he ran through 2 goblins lunging with their swords. Then a sinister blade shot out from his right arm, the authority of the demonic sword. Another goblin tried to get close but met the same fate. A notification popped up every time he took down an enemy, notifying him that he'd killed a common E-rank monster and that his EXP was increasing. He kept mowing down goblins until he hit level 4. Looking at the aftermath of the battle, he couldn't help but wonder what these monsters were, what this experience meant, and why he felt stronger after beating them. After thinking it over, he decided his first move was to gather intel. So he activated another one of his skills, the authority of predation. Terrifying dark specters erupted from his body, the Demon King's beasts. Using this power, he was able to extract biological information from the defeated goblins, though he couldn't learn anything else about the world he was in right now. A notification indicated his demonic energy had increased by 1 point, which just confused him even more. Demonic energy was only supposed to exist in hell, but now it was here too. That meant there was a chance he wasn't on Earth. That thought terrified him, since the only thing that kept him going in hell for so long was the hope of returning home. Just as his mind was about to break, he heard a scream in the distance. It wasn't a monster or a demon shriek, it was a human scream. And it was a woman's. Without a second thought, Kanbo used another of his powers to speed up, blazing through the forest. It was the authority of speed. As he ran like the wind, he thought to himself that for 10,000 years he'd only seen monsters with tentacles or weird limbs, so he didn't care if the person screaming was hot or not. As long as she had 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, and was human, he'd be thrilled. Remembering Lilith, he reaffirmed his absolute hatred for tentacles. He finally reached the source of the scream. What he saw was a horde of goblins even bigger than the last one, surrounding someone with long, purple hair trapped against a tree. As he got closer, he just kept thinking, asterisk, please be a real human. Ignoring the goblins he ran past, he focused only on the figure crying for help. When he got close enough, he saw 2 beautiful tear-filled golden eyes, a nose, a mouth, and the body of a human woman. It was almost like a dream. She had no tentacles. Kanbo shouted for joy like never before on Recap Manhwa, running with tears in his eyes, totally forgetting he was in the middle of a horde of bloodthirsty monsters. A goblin moved to slice the young woman with its sword, but before it could get close, it was wiped out by Kanbo's sword authority along with the entire pack. It only took him a second to destroy them. After, he reached out to the purple-haired girl leaning against the tree. She took his hand, and as they touched, the Demon King's heart hammered in his chest. Suddenly 10,000 years of torment seemed worth it. He was witnessing the peak moment for all demonkind love. The trembling young woman sincerely thanked him for saving her life, introducing herself as Seola. Kanbo was straight up speechless, not moving an inch as he held her hand. When she asked if something was wrong, he gripped her hand even tighter and excitedly asked her to marry him. This left Seola completely confused and stunned. She had just been saved from a guaranteed death by goblins and had no clue how to react to the sudden marriage proposal. Kanbo, realizing he'd gotten a little too carried away seeing the first human in 10,000 years, rushed to apologize and properly introduce himself. He then asked if Seola was alright since she'd gotten injured while escaping the goblins. Before she could answer, she collapsed right into his arms due to the injury on her leg. As she fell, something slipped out of her cloak, a cell phone. Kanbo saw it and felt a rush of relief, finally having proof that he was really on Earth. He sat Seola against a tree and offered to take care of her wound, an offer she gratefully accepted. Tearing a strip from his own cloak, he improvised a bandage. While he did it, he thought about how he and Seola could communicate so easily despite the thousands of years he'd spent in hell. He remembered that thousands of years ago, he himself had outlawed the demonic language in the underworld, forcing demons to speak only Korean, and had even personally instructed them. He did it so he wouldn't forget his native tongue for when he returned to Earth. Now that decision was paying off as he was using Korean with a human. When he finished wrapping Seola's leg and gave her back the phone, he saw on the screen that the current year was 2023. That meant they were in the same timeline. Kanbo was positive he'd calibrated space and time correctly, which could only mean that during the 5 years he was in hell, monsters like these goblins had started appearing on Earth. He told Seola to rest before they continued while he mulled over how little he knew about the current situation. He started asking Seola what she was doing in such a dangerous place. She explained that she had entered an E-rank gate by herself to hunt, since she had just awakened as a player the day before. However, she quickly realized it was a mistake to enter alone. Kambo didn't understand all the terms she was using, but he knew the information was valuable. He asked for her level, and she replied that she was barely level 6, which left him a little embarrassed since his current level was lower than hers. Seeing how strong and skilled Kambo was at taking out the horde, Seola asked him why he was in an E-rank gate. He just replied that he had his own circumstances. They both sat among the remains of the battle, resting after having survived a life-or-death situation. Their shoulders happened to touch, which made Seola blush. She immediately stood up to break the tension, but as she did, her injured leg nearly made her collapse. Luckily, Kambo caught her and offered to help her walk, which made her even more nervous. She tried to refuse his help, saying she had already caused him too much trouble, but Kambo calmly replied that refusing help in a time of need wasn't a virtue and that he would accompany her. When he asked which way they should go, Seola pointed, blushing, and accepted his support, at least until they reached the gate entrance. Kambo smiled, thinking this was the first conversation he'd had with a human being in 10,000 years. Aside from his sudden marriage proposal, everything had gone better than expected, and Seola didn't suspect his true identity. As they walked together toward the exit, he strengthened his resolve to learn and adapt to Earth's society, although he sensed it would be anything but easy. When he arrived, he saw a portal as large as the tree it was connected to. Unease washed over his face. This dimensional rift in space made it clear to him that this place wasn't entirely Earth. There wasn't any equipment keeping it open, so he wondered how it was possible for a gate of that magnitude to sustain itself. When Seola's leg felt a little better, they both decided to enter the rift. Kambo was enveloped by a blinding light, and as he opened his crimson eyes, he found himself in an area packed with people. Some were wearing armor capes and fantasy-style clothes, others were looking for party members to hunt goblins. There were people operating modern monitors and even beggars pleading to join a group. The only thing they had in common was that they all had 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. They were human. Kambo's eyes grew wider as he saw a busy street. The sunlight hitting his skin, the tall buildings, and the lively urban atmosphere. He felt a lump in his throat and couldn't help but cry as he realized he had truly returned home. At that moment, Seola formally invited him to her house for a meal. She said she wanted to thank him and repay him for everything that had happened. To Kambo, looking at the beautiful young woman, it all felt like the first days of spring. But just as he was about to accept the invitation, a firm voice ordered them to stop. As they turned, they saw 2 men who looked like law enforcement agents asking to see their player cards. This confused Kambo, who didn't know what that kind of card was. Seola showed hers while he pretended to get his out. As one of the men approached, Kambo's eyes turned black, with emerald pupils like a serpent's. He activated his ability to alter the target's perception by manipulating their vision. A deformed specter appeared like a demon covered in rags with a blindfold over its eyes and a red eye in its mouth. It was the authority of the blind, one of his powers. Under this effect, he showed his finger to the man, and the man accepted it as if it were a valid ID, falling into a state of trance. Then Kambo and Seola walked towards her apartment. Seola apologized, saying the building didn't have an elevator, so they would have to take the stairs. Kambo was simply happy to be there. The scent of an old building, the narrow stairs, the coldness of the handrail, and the dusty windows made his 10,000-year-long dream feel real, and it was even more so because he was in the home of the beautiful Miss Seola. Of all the places he could be, he was right there, as if it were a reward for everything he had been through. Everything was going well, and that gave him a jolt of hope, as if a happy future was about to unfold from that very moment. Even so, he told himself not to get too confident. With so many things going his way, Kambo couldn't help but laugh internally at his good luck since he left hell. However, he soon heard Seola calling out to her mother and understood that the situation was not what he had imagined. Seola's mother came at once to tend to her, making sure she was all right after returning from a hunt. She reminded her daughter that she should go with others and not alone like she had. With a nervous smile, Seola lied and said she had gone with a group to keep her from worrying more. Kambo finally accepted that Seola's invitation was just to share a meal. The young woman introduced him to her mother as the man who had saved her from a jam. Kambo bowed his head respectfully, proving that even 10,000 years in hell couldn't erase his manners. Seola's mother took his hands and thanked him sincerely for rescuing her daughter. Then she invited him into the house, promising to prepare something as delicious as she could. Kambo thanked her for the hospitality, although deep down he would have preferred to have dinner alone with Seola. Even so, remembering his life in hell, he realized he had a lot to appreciate in that moment. As they entered, Seola checked a message from her mother that she had received while she was hunting. The man noticed the phone and immediately recalled his mission: gather all possible information about the current state of the earth. He courteously asked to borrow Seola's phone with the excuse that he had lost his, and she, trusting, agreed without any issue. The young woman asked him to make himself comfortable while the food was ready and went to her room to change her clothes. Kangbo, upon touching the screen, felt a strange familiarity that took him back to his memories from 10,000 years ago. Although everything seemed surprising to him, he couldn't waste time being impressed. He took off his cloak and prepared to investigate seriously, ever since he had been dragged to hell 5 years ago. He searched for news from 2018 to understand what had happened during his absence. He remembered that day, February 22, 2018, the day of the Great Calamity. That day, unknown and terrifying creatures appeared from hundreds of portals, identical to the one that had dragged him to hell. The world was plunged into chaos as these beasts were immune to weapons and not even artillery. Heavy artillery could stop them. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were massacred trying to confront them. In the aftermath, the World Emergency Operations Union was founded, and Korea was the 9th country to join. The first player appeared in the United States, though their identity was still a total mystery. After them, the number of players started to blow up all over the world, bringing a spark of hope to humanity in those disastrous times. Kangbo realized that the day the calamity hit was the same day he was dragged to hell. He figured one of those portals had to be the cause, but all the articles were just speculation. He needed more solid intel. Suddenly, Seola's mom announced that dinner was ready and set a steaming pot on the table. Kangbo's eyes lit up when he saw it, but when he looked inside, he couldn't believe it. It was kimchi stew, the only taste that had kept him sane in hell. There were also a bunch of side dishes. The woman wished him a good meal, but he was already hypnotized by the food and couldn't hear a thing. He took the first spoonful and started eating with Seola and her mom. His hands were shaking as he tasted it, and after that first bite he couldn't stop. He mixed it with rice, devouring the food. In hell he had survived. By feeding on demonic energy and devouring disgusting monsters, his body had become deformed, but his sense of taste was still human. The flesh and blood of demons were nasty as hell, and for thousands of years he had to endure that torment. Anyone else would have gone insane, but he held on, driven by his desire to come home. And now, after tasting something familiar, he couldn't hold back the tears. He was back on Earth, back home. From the bottom of his heart, he thanked Seola and her mom for the first real feast he'd had in 10,000 years, even though Seola thought she should be the one thanking him. Forgetting so much after just offering a simple meal, Kangbo savored every single bite, completely overcome with emotion. With tears in his eyes and a full heart, he asked for another bowl. The young woman immediately got him one, and both she and her mother were happy to see him eat with so much joy. He just kept devouring the food while Seola watched him fondly. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the house, blowing the door and part of the walls clean off. But Kangbo didn't seem to care. Through the dust, a silhouette appeared, walking in and cursing at Seola. She and her mom were alarmed when they saw it was a blonde kid who looked like trouble with a violent attitude. This guy named Han Tae-hyun walked up to Seola and started screaming at her for going into a portal alone. Pissed at his disrespect, Seola demanded he get out. Tae-hyun got even more pissed hearing that, while Seola firmly warned him to back off, telling him she was a full-fledged player now. Tae-hyun shot back, mocking her words, and slammed his fist into the wall, trying to intimidate Seola and her mom. She warned him again to stay away on recap manhwa, pulling her mom behind her to protect her. Tae-hyun just scoffed again and looked away. At the terrified mother, he sneered, talking trash about her parents, complaining about a father who died too quick and a mother who could barely scrape by. Seola cursed him out, blaming him for the family's situation. Then Tae-hyun violently grabbed her by the hands and tried to drag her to the Andras Guild. She fought back with all her might, cussing out the guild and calling it trash. That just pissed off Tae-hyun, who shot back with a threatening tone, saying he'd put her in a good group since someone had to take out the trash. In a desperate move, Seola bit Tae-hyun's arm, which made him slap her hard, sending her flying toward her mother. The bite made him go even more ballistic. Tae-hyun screamed that Seola had to obey and be his tribute since she claimed to be a player. He wanted to take her on for real. Her mother tried to intervene, begging him, but Tae-hyun brutally threw her to the ground, calling her trash. Seola ran to see if she was okay, glaring at him with pure hatred. Tae-hyun insulted Seola again, saying the only thing valuable about her was her pretty face, and that she should join the Andras Guild to serve as an offering for the higher-ups. Just then he heard chewing noises. The Demon King Kangbo was still enjoying his feast as if nothing else existed. The scene confused Tae-hyun, who couldn't understand how this guy could just keep eating without even flinching. He decided to let go of Seola and confront the stranger at the table. He called out to him several times, but Kangbo didn't answer. Impatient, Tae-hyun kicked the table, sending all the dishes flying. The remains of the kimchi stew splattered on the floor, and Kangbo, seeing it, let out a gut-wrenching scream of pain and fury. Tae-hyun had no idea why the guy was reacting like that, and even mistook him for a beggar, obsessed with food. Seola was silent, not knowing what to say. Tae-hyun tried to provoke the stranger even more, kicking him hard. That's when Kangbo's demonic presence awakened. The bloodlust radiating from him made Tae-hyun see him as a real demon. Full of rage over the wasted stew, Kangbo looked like a beast about to pounce. Tae-hyun shocked by that energy-focused power into his fist, wrapping it in blue flames. Even so, he didn't think the man in front of him was a real threat. Just as he was about to attack, a beam of light hit him. It was Seola, who with tears in her eyes had used her white staff to distract him and give Kangbo a chance to escape. But the Demon King was already ready to strike. With the authority of his demon sword, he lunged at Tae-hyun. The kid didn't expect Kangbo's speed and took a direct hit to the chest that sent him flying backward. Though he was in pain, he got up quick and covered his fists in blue fire to keep fighting. However, He was met with a brutal punch to the face and a kick to the side, bleeding and covered in bruises. Taehyun managed to grab one of Kangbo's legs, convincing himself the hits weren't that strong. But the Demon King fell backward and with his other leg kicked him square in the face, freeing himself. Taehyun couldn't accept that he was losing to some random nobody. Kangbo, sword in hand, got ready to finish him off. Taehyun tried to unleash his blue flames, but he fell into another trap. A devastating blow to his side forced him to his knees, extinguishing his fire. The Demon King looked down on him with overwhelming pressure as Taehyun wondered just who the hell this guy was. Kangbo stumped his head into the ground, pinning him down. The kid screamed as a sharp pain shot through his arms. Kangbo had stabbed his sword through them to immobilize him. It was all in the name of the wasted kimchi stew. Taehyun couldn't believe he was suffering this much over a simple dish. Kangbo grabbed him by the hair and slammed his head against the floor over and over until he was unrecognizable. Then he forced him to scream that kimchi stew was sacred. He demanded he scream louder, and to break his will, he struck the wound on his arm. The problem child finally broke down in tears, repeating it over and over until he sounded like a believer praying to a god. He had finally found the way of the kimchi stew. This absurd scene in the dining room left Seola completely stunned. Kangbo kept tormenting Taehyun until he turned him into a sobbing mess full of rage and frustration. In that moment, he looked more like a demon than a human. It wasn't until Taehyun screamed with all his might that kimchi stew was a sacred existence in the voice of someone who'd found God that Kangbo finally stopped and sheathed his blade. He stood over the defeated Taehyun and warned him to never disrespect kimchi stew again. Taehyun was left on the floor confused and broken by what he'd just been through. It was a brutal way to learn the importance of respecting food. Seola and her mom's apartment was a wreck after all the chaos, especially the dining room. Seola's mom finally had a moment to rest and recover. Meanwhile, Seola was still trying to process what happened as she tended to her mother's wounds. Amid the wreckage, someone was washing broken dishes. At first it looked like a stranger, but it was a beaten and bruised Taehyun, forced by Kangbo to clean up the mess he himself had made. Kangbo even stole his clothes, leaving him completely humiliated. Not only did this kid get beaten up, he was also forced to do chores, and on top of that, they took his clothes, creating the perfect tragedy. As he washed the dishes, Taehyun couldn't hold back his tears. Frustration and rage were building up inside him, wondering why he was being treated like this. Kangbo suddenly interrupted him with a loud noise that made him jump, then asked if he held a grudge against him. The traumatized kid denied it. Kangbo watched Taehyun's every move, remembering the years he spent in hell, where he could never sleep, eat, or live in peace, always fighting and devouring demons just to survive. All of that was the luxuries that had been taken from him, and still a guy like Taehyung didn't appreciate a damn thing. That's why he told him to treat his life like it was precious. Taehyung seemed to take it in, but deep down he was already plotting his revenge. When the dishes were done, Kangbo told the kid straight up that there was no point in leaving him alive. Those words absolutely terrified Taehyung, who was scared of what would happen next. Then Kangbo grabbed him by the shirt and promised him, with a twisted smile and eyes that turned a deep purple, that he wouldn't kill him. He warned him that death would be a mercy compared to what he was about to do. Taehyung felt his grip on reality slipping. In front of him, Kangbo transformed into the image of a massive horse, purple with a white mane and 3 dark, menacing eyes. It was the demon Orobas, the embodiment of fear. The demonic spirit was crushing him with its sheer presence, making him beg again and again for it to stay away. In the end, Taehyung was consumed by Orobas's power, losing his mind and pissing his pants, while Kangbo burned an unforgettable brand of terror into his soul, turning him into his puppet before letting him go. He warned him never to speak a word of what happened. Taehyung staggered away, defeated and humiliated, reduced to a pathetic shell of a man. Meanwhile, Seola was thinking about what happened and realized that once again Kangbo had saved not just her, but her mother too. As she watched him filled with gratitude, she thought about how amazing this guy was. On the other hand, Kangbo was checking his phone and realized his biggest problem was cash. He was flat broke. That's when he found out about the magic stones that held the power of defeated monsters. He asked Seola if she had any, and she handed him one she got from a low-rank goblin. They said the darker the stone, the higher its rank. Kangbo checked out the stone and noticed it didn't have any demonic energy. He figured it contained a different kind of power instead. He remembered the last hunt where he *had felt a little demonic energy, and figured his first guess was wrong. The stones didn't hold demonic energy but magical energy. Still, he planned to sell them for cash. But he needed a player ID to do that. He asked Seola for the address of the player management office, and she offered to go with him since she had to head there anyway. She explained that her family situation was tough, which is why she tried to hunt alone. Luckily, Kangbo showed up to save her. After hearing her out, Kangbo thought that after 10,000 years of fighting demons, he'd finally found a real angel in Seola. She showed her resolve to take the basic lessons and move on to her second awakening stage. As they were getting ready to go, Kangbo thought to himself that he had no intention of helping her, since moving around with someone as weak as her would just slow down his hunting efficiency. He knew it was cold, but his number one priority was getting his power back. Staring out the window, he thought about how he had to get even stronger to survive in this world, just like he did in hell. Seola snapped him out of it, reminding him he still didn't have an ID, so their first stop had to be the district office. Finally, Kangbo got a citizen ID card under the name O Kangbo. The whole process was fast and easy, proving that in the last 5 years nobody had even reported him missing. The thought that no one noticed he was gone made Kambo feel a little down. We get a flashback of Kambo's life before he was dragged to hell. He lived alone, totally isolated, surviving on instant ramen the same way he got by in hell. By eating raw monster meat. Nobody knew what he'd been through. He was a guy who deserved a happy ending. While he was lost in thought, Seola called out to him, telling him to look out the train windows since they were about to arrive. In front of them was a massive, vibrant city with a towering building right in the center. Seola said how much she loved this view, and Kambo agreed, thinking that this time things would be different. After the train ride, they got to the entrance of the player management office. Kambo was blown away by how huge the building was. It was even bigger than an old airport. Just then Seola pulled out her old phone and handed it to Kambo for him to use. The gesture moved Kambo, who thought to himself that she really was an angel. He thanked her for the phone, and Seola headed off to register for the beginner's class. Before they split up, she invited him to grab dinner after they were finished with their business at the office, and Kambo accepted with a smile, thinking about how nice that meal would be. Inside the management office, Kambo took in the scale of the place and realized just how important players had become. He stuck his new ID into a machine to get a number, and was directed to testing room 09 by a blue line on the floor. In there he saw players of all ages and skill levels. He was confident he'd ace the test no problem. He overheard other people talking about players like Bakicha and Yeonyu who hit S rank on their very first test and went on to become part of the 5 great guild masters. Kambo figured he shouldn't stand out too much this early on. According to his research, the 5 great guild masters were Kim Jae-hyun of Mircha Yeonwoo of Red Roses, Baek Chan-yoon of Hanul, Young Yeonwoo of Sanare, and Chae Min-yo of Deonuris. Together they formed the most powerful guilds in Korea. Kambo was sure he'd run into them one day once he got his strength back. Reading all this info just made him want to power level even faster. Checking his status window, he thought maybe he could get stronger thanks to this player title. But his train of thought was cut short when they called his number. He was led to a desk across from a guy in glasses who told him to place his hand on a white orb. The orb would reveal his attribute rank based on its color. The brighter the light, the higher the rank. As he reached out, Kambo worried about standing out too much, which could become a pain. The test started and the orb glowed with a blinding light. Kambo braced himself, accepting that he was just too OP for this test, but when the light died down, the representative announced that his rank was F. The mental damage was insane for someone who'd been a demon king. Kambo was in total shock, unable to accept being the lowest of the low. The rep just kept on explaining the rules and precautions for being a player. Kambo would be issued an E-rank card which would only let him enter portals of the same rank unless he was with a guardian. Still confused, he asked how he could rank up. They told him he could do it like Seola by completing the basic training course to advance to D rank, or by turning in a certain amount of magic stones. Kambo decided to go with the magic stone route. He got his player card, an E-rank card, and turned down enrolling in the basic course, getting up right away. The rep interpreted his decision as a sign of someone in hopeless shock, figuring he'd just end up dead in a portal. However, just then dark spots appeared on the testing orb until it turned completely black and then cracked. The representative was stunned, since even the top S-rank players had only ever managed a dark gray. He never imagined someone could get solid black. Kambo headed out to the E-rank portal area. The place was packed with players trying to party up. Again, he noticed some rogue class player begging to join a team. Kambo didn't pay him much mind. Flashed his card at the guard and entered an E-rank portal by himself. Inside, he found himself in a familiar scene. The same place he'd fought goblins before. He stretched, getting ready to hunt, when a guy in heavy armor and a massive build walked up to him. He was so built that Kambo mistook him for a bear, looked like the leader of a hunting party. The man asked if he was there to hunt solo and if he'd already had his second awakening. Kambo answered honestly, which surprised the big guy. Despite his looks, the man just seemed worried and showed a kind personality. He even offered to let Kambo join his party for some field practice. Even though the other members were strongly against it, the kind-hearted man even offered to give him their share of the magic stones to help him out. Seeing the big guy's good intentions, Kambo politely turned him down. Before leaving, the man introduced himself as Kang Tae-soo. Kambo did the same, trying to politely turn him down one more time. Tesso, a solid guide and tank player, was popular with everyone. Still, he insisted on keeping things casual since he was only 24, which totally surprised Kambo. At first glance, he looked like a middle-aged dude, at least 39, not 24. Tesso even showed him his ID. But Kambo calmly declined. Tesso didn't push it and just gave him a tip about the goblins in the gate. He warned him there was a massive, powerful goblin, the goblin boss, a monster on a whole different level from the others. Kambo thanked him for the heads up, and each party went their separate ways. If he'd been a noob, he would have gone with them, but going solo was his comfort zone. He hyped himself up to take on the gate's challenge and activated his demonic eyes speed skill. He quickly scanned the forest from the air until he found the goblins' base camp on Recap Manhwa, then dropped right into the middle of them. The Demon King was about to start his hunt. The smile on Kambo's face as he plunged his sword into his first victim was that of a true Demon King. Without stopping, he ran another one through and sliced a third in half, thinking this was way too easy. The goblin purge had just begun. A wave of goblins spotted the human and flew into a rage. With his dual-wielding sword skill, Kambo's massacre was just getting started. Axes and blades couldn't even touch him without suffering a tragic fate. Heads rolled and bodies were run through. With a circular swing of his sword, another group fell, his crimson eyes, shining like a general's in the middle of battle, effortlessly cutting through enemy lines. The goblins' makeshift weapons were useless against his demonic skill. They were wiped out before they could even lay a finger on him. The monsters fought with everything they had, but ended up falling one after another. Kambo's double-edged sword was like a weapon of mass destruction. With every move, he devastated a huge part of the camp. His eyes slowly took on the look of a true demon king. Showing no mercy for these annoying creatures, the ones left alive trembled as they witnessed the massacre, blood soaking his body. Kambo braced himself for another round. If this was him with his power sealed, it was hard to imagine how savage he'd been in his prime. After sheathing his swords and wiping the sweat from his brow, he surveyed the blood-red scene. With so many enemies, even he was feeling drained. A system window popped up, showing he'd gained 4 levels and his demonic energy had increased by 1 after wiping out the camp. He was now level 8, the grind never stopped. He then activated his predation skill. Dark, purple-hued spirits emerged and began to devour the flesh and blood of the fallen goblins. Kambo sensed the demonic energy in their bodies, confirming it wasn't in the magic stones but spread throughout their flesh, varying depending on how long they'd been dead. This meant that by devouring freshly killed monsters, he could slowly regain his power. Using this technique, his energy increased by 2 points. This way he could keep selling magic stones and power himself up at the same time. He went through the goblin bones, collecting a huge amount of stones. The remains on the ground reminded him of the taste of chicken, giving him the idea to go eat with Siola later. That thought motivated him to speed up his collection. Suddenly, a loud crash interrupted his work. When he turned, he saw a gigantic figure emerge from the forest, knocking down trees as it advanced. It was the boss monster Tetsu had warned him about. A hobgoblin. It had the appearance of a goblin, but massive with gigantic muscles, a huge sword, and savage armor. When it locked its eyes on Kambo, it readied itself with fury as demonic energy began to concentrate in its weapon. That took him by surprise. The monster could control mana. Without giving him time to think, the beast charged ferociously at Kambo. He activated a sword in one arm and gathered energy in the other, fully confident in its destructive power. The hobgoblin swung with a brutal slash and Kambo barely managed to dodge it. The monster readied another attack, its blade cloaked in mana. With his 2 swords, Kambo managed to block the blow, but the force of the impact sent him flying and left him wide open. He tried to block the next onslaught, but the weight difference made it almost impossible to resist. Using the enemy's own force, he deflected the blow to the side and counterattacked. But his attack just bounced off the monster's armor. His defense was exposed. To defeat this beast, he had to find a significant opening. With agility, he dodged deadly slashes and even a devastating kick. Despite the creature's size, he couldn't land a single hit. Seizing the moment, Kambo created some distance. The hobgoblin was proving to be a worthy boss, much stronger than any goblin he'd faced before even tearing through the trees in its path. Kambo picked up a goblin skull, seeing it as simple entertainment. He threw it and caught the monster's attention, whose face twisted with hate and rage. In that instant, he made his move, activating the skill Wrath of the Demonic Crossing. A spectral figure of a beautiful woman merged with the hobgoblin's silhouette. The effect was immediate. The beast was pushed to the brink of its rage, losing control and attacking wildly. Kambo knew the fight was decided. The hobgoblin's strength multiplied with every blow. That skill boosted the user's power several times over, but it had a fatal drawback. The price was a curse that stripped away sanity and the ability to think clearly. The attacks, now chaotic and sloppy, made it easy for Kambo to dodge, precisely finding openings between its movements. Without hesitation, he plunged his sword into the creature's legs, making it fall. Using his sword skill, he met the next attack head-on, sending blood flying everywhere. The fight ended when the powerful hobgoblin lay lifeless on the ground. Kambo, however, felt disappointed in his own performance, knowing that in his prime, he would have defeated that creature with a simple flick of his finger. Suddenly, a system notification caught his attention. Eliminating the boss and clearing the entire camp solo granted him a 150% experience bonus. The hobgoblin turned out to be a C-rank monster, and thanks to his victory, Kambo leveled up 3 times. Upon reaching level 11, his second awakening phase activated. The revealed attribute was called Insatiable Hunger, which allowed him to absorb even more demonic energy through predation. This discovery lifted his spirits as it meant he could get stronger much faster. To test his new skill, he activated predation on the hobgoblin's corpse. A dark, deep purple specter devoured the flesh and blood of the fallen beast. Kambo noticed that the smoke from predation was now more dense thanks to Insatiable Hunger. His demonic energy increased by 3 levels, reaching a total of 19. This huge boost left him satisfied. To test it, he released his energy and confirmed he was now 3 times stronger than before. Still, he remained cautious, unsure of where this sudden power-up came from. Suddenly, he felt as if he'd been transported to a different, much more sinister world. The sky showed a red moon, and before him stretched an endless sea. It was his demonic core of 10,000, and just as he suspected the seal limiting him had weakened, he figured that it happened because of his second awakening phase and concluded he could strengthen it even more by leveling up. After collecting the hobgoblin's magic stone, he set his next goal to reach his third awakening at level 20. A few hours later, he was at a fried chicken restaurant packed with customers. Kambo and Siola were sitting at a table. He was devouring the chicken like a maniac, switching between a fork and his own hands. Covered in plastic gloves, He ate right down to the bone, washing it all down with a cold beer. Seola, happy to see him enjoying himself, playfully asked him if the chicken was better than her kimchi stew. That question sparked a small battle in Kambo's mind, but they both ended up laughing, declaring the stew the winner. To Kambo's surprise, Seola offered him the last piece of chicken from her plate, which he gratefully accepted. Then she asked if he had any family or friends nearby. His answer revealed he had no family, no friends, and no place to call home. Noticing his sadness, Seola surprised him by inviting him to stay at her place for a while, even though they barely knew each other. She felt like he had already helped her out so much. Embarrassed, Kambo accepted. Then he pulled an envelope from his pocket, with about 3 million in cash, and handed it to Seola, telling her to take it as rent. She felt uncomfortable, thinking he'd already done too much, but Kambo, knowing about her family's struggles, convinced her to take it. With tears in her eyes, Seola took the money and promised him her stew would taste even better from now on. For Kambo, the thought of eating this every day was a godsend, but he was also curious about the nearby D-rank portals. Kambo asked Seola about them, and she told him about some gates filled with lizardmen, all while still munching on her fried chicken. He wondered if those lizards would be tasty. Later they went to Seola's place, and she showed him the room her brother used to use. He crashed on the comfy bed as she wished him good night and hit the lights. Lying there, he thought about how long it had been since the last time he'd slept on something so soft. The peaceful feeling convinced him he'd made the right call by agreeing to stay with her. The next day, the buzz around the magic gates was still going strong. Kambo watched the players trying their luck. He even spotted some dude begging parties to let him in, just like always. He showed his new D-rank ID and entered another gate. This time the portal opened into a humid, swampy forest. After a few stretches, he activated his silent skill and moved swiftly through the dense undergrowth. He'd prepped this power because Seola had told him the lizardmen made up for their poor eyesight with incredible hearing. He snuck up on a small group of them, remembering they were weak against fire. Without hesitation, he summoned a flaming owl, the infernal skill of the demon Andras. The flaming owl appeared behind him and engulfed 2 lizardmen in searing flames. The monsters writhed in agony, trying to flee to the water, but they were out of luck. This fire could only be put out with mana or demonic energy, otherwise it would burn forever. He quickly wiped out the group. The fire didn't just burn their bodies, but their very life force, leaving behind corpses, ready to be consumed by his predation. After using the demon Andras's hellfire skill to wipe out the lizardmen, he remembered that Taeyong's guild was also named Andras. Kambo just shrugged it off, figuring there might be some connection. Kambo was seen using predation to completely devour the lizardman, leaving nothing behind. Another group of lizardmen saw this and immediately got ready to fight. They charged at him with rage in their eyes, but they ended up as ash, just like the group before. Once again, the lizards became fuel for Kambo's predation. He then activated his silence skill to muffle the screams of the flaming lizardmen and avoid drawing any more attention. After wiping out those 2 groups, he leveled up, though it was already obvious that leveling up was getting slower. As he was thinking up a plan to hunt more packs, someone called out to him. A voice pointed out that his gear made him look like a total noob and invited him to join their guild. It was a party of 5 players. Kambo asked for the guild's name, and the guy in the middle, wearing a necklace with an emblem, proudly answered that they were the Andras Guild. Kambo gave them a bored look and walked away. As soon as he was gone, the group started talking trash about him. With their bruised egos and sinister looks, they planned to teach him a lesson and use him to blow off some steam deep inside the swamp gate. Surrounded by dense trees, hellfire blazed, burning groups of lizardmen. Some were still being consumed by the specters from Kambo's predation skill. Believing he'd wiped out all the lizards in the area, he was thinking about whether to play it safe or go all out to level up faster. But then he was interrupted by the same guys from the Andras Guild that he'd seen earlier. This time they were acting like hotshot veterans. With just one glance, Kambo could tell the leader had a habit of preying on the weak. He turned down their invitation, saying he did just fine hunting solo. But the leader didn't buy it, seeing no dead monsters around. Kambo said he was just resting, but the leader accused him of copying an attitude. Tired of their crap, Kambo insulted him. The leader got even more pissed when Kambo asked if he wanted to fight. Just then another member tried to step to him, but the leader stopped him, saying he'd teach him a lesson himself. The leader underestimated him, thinking he was a B rank at best. Kambo found that comment amusing. The man drew his sword and banged it against his bracer, making a loud noise. The others looked at Kambo with contempt, reminding him that the lizardmen were drawn to loud noises. Kambo laughed, thinking how childish it was, like the leader was some little drummer boy. The swamp began to rumble with the arrival of a horde of lizardmen. The leader ordered his group to prepare magic barriers and arrogantly asked Kambo what he was going to do when the monsters arrived. He even offered to save him if he kneeled and begged before they showed up. Amused, Kambo got ready, his eyes shifting into a demonic glare. He clapped his hands loudly, using the deep roar skill to blast the sound across the whole area. The group was shocked as he continued to provoke them, even stomping so hard that the ground shook and the trees swayed. The leader called him crazy, but Kambo just stopped with a mischievous grin. The guild members huddled inside their small magic barrier, terrified by the racket. Soon, a massive horde of lizardmen swarmed in from the water, the trees and their nests drawn by the noise. The group trembled in fear, seeing so many monsters surrounding them and relentlessly attacking the barrier. They had never seen anything like it and started to lose hope. The leader cursed Kambo for being so reckless while Kambo just jumped onto a tree branch laughing. He said he also knew how sensitive the lizards were to sound. The monsters kept hammering the barrier, and the leader screamed they were all gonna die because of Kambo, but he just shot back that asterisk. He asterisk wasn't going to die here, only their guild was. Andras. With that, he activated his silence skill, and the lizardmen completely ignored him like he wasn't even there. The leader was paralyzed seeing how he could manipulate sound like that. Suddenly the small barrier shattered and the members were exposed. The leader was about to call for another barrier, but when he turned he saw his mage brutally run through by a lizardman's sword. The woman cried for help but was devoured in front of everyone. One by one the members started to fall. The leader, filled with horror, tried to stifle his screams so he wouldn't attract more monsters. In that moment he saw Kambo just watching everything. He begged for help, apologizing for having insulted him. But Kambo just mockingly wished him good luck. The leader's fury exploded and he screamed curses at him, blaming him for luring the lizards. His screams ended up drawing the attention of the creatures which surrounded and devoured him. Kambo watched without emotion, remembering his philosophy: fight evil with greater evil and violence with even greater violence. Shortly after, he unleashed the hellfire, reducing groups of lizardmen to nothing. When the flames died down, he activated his predation skill, increasing his demonic energy. At some point he discovered that the Gaia system protected players, but he didn't care about consuming their special abilities. The only thing he was after was their demonic energy, which had already hit 30. Kambo was stoked about the massive power-up from his hellfire skill. By summoning the specter of the demon Andras, the flames had become bigger and brighter, and even the quality of his demonic energy had improved. Now he just needed to level up, bigger fires, bigger desires. As he picked up a magic stone, he felt eager to reach his third awakening. He had been hunting non-stop for the past few days, and he knew it could still take a while to get there. He left behind the remains of the Andras guild that had tried to pick a fight with him and walked away.